Have you ever had someone try to control your life just because they have a little power? An overbearing HOA, a difficult neighbor, or someone who likes to impose unreasonable rules on everyone around? If the answer is yes, then this story is definitely for you. This is not just a small battle with the HOA, but a confrontation to regain freedom, and I did it. Let's explore this story, and don't forget to like, share, or follow so you don't miss the next dramatic developments. I never thought that a simple habit like walking every morning could become the cause of a tense war between me and the HOA. When I moved to this residential area, all I wanted was a peaceful life, enjoying fresh air, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I love waking up early, going outside to breathe in the cool air before the sun rises, feeling the peace of a small neighborhood. It's a moment when I can temporarily forget the pressures of work, the worries of daily life, and spend time relaxing with myself. This neighborhood at first glance seems perfect. The streets are clean, the white picket fences are neat, the green lawns are neatly trimmed. Everything looks like it came out of an ideal suburban postcard. I thought this would be the right place for me to enjoy a gentle life, but I was wrong. I didn't know that behind that perfect appearance is an unreasonable control system run by the HOA, headed by Karen, a domineering woman with a prying gaze and a bizarre obsession with controlling every little behavior of the residents in the neighborhood. My walking habit started the first day I moved in. I woke up early, grabbed a cup of coffee, and walked around the neighborhood, both to relax and to get used to my new home. I didn't do anything to attract attention, just strolled along the public sidewalk, enjoying the fresh air. But I soon realized that there was a gaze watching me from a house on the corner, a large house with a sturdy white picket fence and perfectly trimmed hydrangeas. At first, I didn't think it was normal for neighbors to notice newcomers. But day after day, Karen, the HOA president, kept following me. She would stand on her porch at the exact moment I walked by, arms folded, eyes squinting in judgment. Gradually, things became clearer. She not only observed me, but also took notes and photographed me from a distance. I wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking on the public sidewalk. Yet to Karen, it seemed unacceptable. At first, I thought Karen was just a picky old woman who had a hard time accepting change. But her annoyance quickly escalated into a confrontation that was unforgiving just because I walked by her house every morning. What had been a harmless affair became a big deal in Karen's eyes. Instead of ignoring me, she chose an unbelievable response, accusing me of harassment right on the public road. It all started when I noticed a change in Karen's eyes. Before, she had just watched me from afar, typing on her phone or standing on her porch with a questioning look. But then, her attitude began to become more obvious. Every morning when I walked by, Karen no longer just stared silently. She folded her arms, frowned, and shook her head in annoyance, as if my presence was an insult to the neighborhood. One time, as I was walking past her gate, I heard a "huh," full of disgust, not too loud but enough for me to realize that she was deliberately letting me hear. I thought about changing my route, taking a different route to avoid unnecessary trouble. But then I asked myself, why should I do that? This is a public road. I haven't broken any rules. I haven't done anything wrong. If I give in, it would be like admitting that I'm doing something reprehensible. I decided to continue my routine, and that's when Karen decided to escalate the matter to a new level. One morning, as I was walking to her front door, Karen suddenly stood on the sidewalk, right in the middle of the path. I paused for a moment, not out of fear, but out of surprise. She stood there, her hands on her hips, her eyes burning with obvious annoyance, as if waiting for me to provoke her. I didn't want to confront her, didn't want to cause trouble, so I moved aside, stepping a little into the road to get around her. But then I heard Karen's voice behind me. "What's wrong with you?" I stopped and turned to look at her. Karen stood there, her eyes no longer filled with scrutiny like before, but with genuine hatred. Before I could react, she continued, "You walk back and forth in front of my house every morning. Don't think I don't notice it." Her voice was higher, full of challenge, and at this moment I realized that Karen was not simply annoyed, she actually believed that I was deliberately harassing her. The absurdity of the situation made me unable to believe my ears. I didn't know how to respond to such a baseless accusation. What had I done besides walking on a public road? But in Karen's eyes, I was more than just a pedestrian. I was a suspect, a doubter, even a threat that she had to deal with. The next morning, as I continued walking, Karen stood at a distance, holding up her phone to take pictures of me. I wasn't sure what she intended to do with the pictures, but I had a hunch that she was planning something against me. This was no longer just a matter of neighbors. Karen, with her power in the HOA, had seen me as an intruder on her territory. And she certainly wasn't going to stop there. The next morning I walked out the door and found a white envelope in the mailbox. A sense of unease rose as I opened it and read the bold subject line, "Violation alert, sidewalk abuse." I had to reread it to make sure I hadn't seen it wrong. The letter claimed that I had disturbed the residents and disrupted the neighborhood simply by walking. The letter ended with a warning of more severe penalties if I continued, along with a $250 fine to ensure respect for public space. I clutched the paper, both amused and outraged. Did the HOA really think they had the right to fine me for walking on a public street? This was clearly a personal attack orchestrated by Karen. A few days ago, she took my picture, and suddenly I got this ridiculous warning? Abuse of the sidewalk? I wasn't blocking the sidewalk. I wasn't placing any personal items. I was just walking, like any other resident. But in Karen's eyes, that was an intrusion. I looked around the quiet street, neighbors walking their dogs, mowing their lawns, kids riding their bikes on the same sidewalk. No one was being fined, just me. They were trying to put me in a corner, hoping I would give in and stop walking. But they were wrong. I wasn't a pushover. I knew the rules, and the HOA couldn't just make up rules to impose on a single individual. I looked at the $250 bill and laughed. Did they think I would pay for a ridiculous charge? No way. I crumpled the letter, threw it in the trash, and continued walking down the street they thought they could control. If Karen wanted to push things further, I wouldn't back down. All day, I couldn't stop thinking about the absurdity of it. I was just walking on a public sidewalk, and I was being made a violator. How many others had quietly suffered, paying fines to avoid trouble? But I wasn't the type to be bullied. My decision was clear. I wouldn't pay the fine. Not because $250 was too much, but because I knew that giving in meant Karen and the HOA wouldn't stop. Today it was abuse of sidewalk. Tomorrow it could be parking at the wrong angle, or leaving the yard light on too long. If I bowed my head once, they would think I was going to give in again. And that never happened. After throwing the fine in the trash, I decided that I would not simply refuse to pay the fine, but rather fight back harder. I spent the evening researching HOAs, their legal rights, and the limits they could not cross. After just an hour of research, I had it clear HOAs do not have control over public sidewalks, which are city property. They can manage homes and yards, but they cannot fine anyone for walking. The $250 fine was completely invalid. This blatant abuse of power not only angered me, but also made me more determined. Did they think I would just take it like everyone else? They were wrong. If Karen wanted to turn this into a fight, I was ready to go all the way. The next morning, I continued my walk, but this time with a twist. I had my phone with me, and I turned on the video recording. If the HOA or Karen were going to confront me again, I wanted proof. I walked slowly, feeling the warm sun on my skin, but my mind was completely clear. As I expected, when I got near Karen's house, she was already standing on her porch, her eyes fixed on me like a predator waiting for prey to stumble into a trap. I didn't care. I slowed down on purpose, taking each step as slowly as possible, almost provocative. If she wanted to make a scene, I would let the whole neighborhood see it. I completed the walk without incident, but when I returned home, an email from the HOA was waiting in my inbox. This time, the tone was no longer simply warning. They accused me of deliberate provocation, threatening the peace of the residential area, and stated that if I did not pay the fine within 48 hours, they would take more serious legal action. I laughed at the pointless threat. I turned to my computer and wrote a short but sharp email response. I had not violated any rules. The HOA had no right to control the sidewalk. And if they continued to threaten me, I would sue for abuse of power. Before sending it, I attached the legal document so they would know that I was not just being defiant, that I knew what I was doing. As the email was sent, I felt a quiet satisfaction. They thought they could control me so easily. Big mistake. But being defensive was not enough. I wanted the HOA, and especially Karen, to understand that I was not alone. If I were alone, they could easily isolate me. But if the entire community were on my side, that would be a nightmare Karen could not control. I started by observing the neighborhood, especially the residents who were out and about in the morning. I knew I wasn't the only one who walked every day. There was an older couple who walked their dog, a young mother pushing a stroller along the path, and a few young people who jogged occasionally. I had never spoken to them, but I knew they were part of the public space, and the HOA couldn't control them all. I decided to find out how many others had suffered from unreasonable HOA regulations. A quick chat with my neighbors revealed a startling truth. I wasn't the only victim. An elderly man was fined for planting the wrong type of flowers in his front yard. A young mother was warned for leaving her child's bike on the porch too long. Everyone had a story. Everyone had been targeted by Karen. And most importantly, everyone was fed up with the tyranny. I saw an opportunity before me. This was no longer a personal battle. It was the beginning of an uprising. That evening, I composed a brief post on the neighborhood forum, a place where residents regularly share information about local events and news. I wrote about my experience, about how the HOA tried to impose unreasonable rules on public sidewalks, and about how I had been ticketed for simply walking in front of Karen's house. I didn't whine, I didn't call for a fight. I simply posed a question. If they can ticket me for walking, who's next? Then I proposed a simple idea, morning fun walks. An initiative to encourage the community to enjoy public sidewalks together without fear of unreasonable control. No protests, no tension, just a group of residents walking together every morning, on the very path the HOA was trying to ban. I set the time for 7 a.m. on a Saturday, a time when most people could join if they wanted to. The response was faster than I expected. Within hours, my post had dozens of comments and messages of support. Some said they had also felt over-scrutinized by the HOA but had never dared to speak up. Others simply wanted to participate because they liked the idea of working together to create a more welcoming space. I even received a message from a resident who had been fined for placing a flower pot on the sidewalk in front of his house, a rule that Karen herself had imposed. When Saturday morning arrived, I wasn't sure how many people would actually show up. But when I stepped out onto the sidewalk, I was surprised. It wasn't just a small group, but more than 20 people gathered. Some were in sweats, ready to run, others had their dogs in tow, and a few had coffee cups in hand, chatting happily as if this were a casual get-together. And the best part, we walked right past Karen's house. I didn't have to look out the front porch to know she was watching. Her angry gaze through the window seemed to claim control of the sidewalk. But now, it belonged to the community. One person might be bullied by the HOA, but the whole neighborhood together. No fine could be imposed on dozens of residents at once. As we completed our first walk, I knew Karen wouldn't be able to ignore it. But this time she wasn't just up against me, but the entire neighborhood. Karen had lost the moment the morning fun walk began, but she refused to admit it. The next morning, I was not surprised to receive another letter from the HOA, this time with a more aggressive tone. She accused me of hosting an illegal event on HOA property, threatening to take me to the disciplinary board if I continued to disrupt the peace. I just laughed. Did Karen still think her old tricks could scare me? What Karen didn't anticipate was that I wasn't the only one in this fight. She was used to intimidating individuals, but this time, the entire community was waking up. Other residents also received warning letters from the HOA, and their reaction was not fear but outrage. Ms. Johnson, an older woman who has lived in the neighborhood for more than 20 years, told me that this was not the first time Karen had abused her power. She once made me repaint my front door because it was a different color than the afternoon sunlight, she said. This was no longer just me. This was the last straw. Within 2 days of the walk, residents began to take action. The neighborhood forum exploded with posts denouncing Karen and the HOA. Some shared the ridiculous fines they had been slapped with, from placing flower pots in the wrong place to parking a few inches off the sidewalk. One person even posted a photo of Karen holding a yardstick to measure the distance between her lawn and the walkway, checking to see if anyone was violating her lawn length rule. The ridiculousness was exposed to the entire neighborhood. But what really scared Karen was not the posts, but the series of formal complaints to the HOA. A group of residents, led by a lawyer who lived in the neighborhood, drafted a comprehensive complaint documenting Karen's abuse of power. It included everything: unreasonable fines, threatening warning letters, emails Karen sent in an authoritarian tone, and most importantly, the baseless letters I and the walkers received. Not stopping there, some residents contacted the local media. Within a week, the city newspaper published an article about HOA Lakewood, exposing Karen's history of arbitrary control. This time, she could not hide. Everything that had helped her maintain her power, the silence and fear of punishment, the personal oppression, collapsed. The neighborhood no longer bowed to the HOA. And this was just the beginning. In the following days, the atmosphere in the neighborhood changed dramatically. Previously, people were wary of Karen. Now they openly criticized the HOA right in front of her house. Some residents freely decorated their gardens, ignoring the rigid regulations. The invisible barriers that Karen had built gradually collapsed. She always thought she controlled everything, but in reality, that power only existed when no one dared to stand up to her. After the complaint was filed, the Lakewood HOA was thrown into chaos. The board, which had once followed Karen's lead, faced a wave of accusations from residents. As the media got involved, the story spread beyond the neighborhood, becoming a textbook example of HOA abuse. Online forums exploded with similar stories, but Karen had gone too far, and now she was paying the price. The board was forced to hold an emergency meeting where everyone could speak up. Karen sat there, her confidence and her usual condescending demeanor gone for the first time. The emergency meeting was held in the community center hall, but the atmosphere was tense and suffocating. The seats were packed with residents, all with the same goal: to see Karen face the consequences of her years of manipulation of the HOA. I walked in, and my eyes met Karen's. Gone was the haughty look or the arrogant smile. Her face was pale, her eyes constantly darting around the council, her hands clenched as if trying to hide her panic. Before the HOA board of directors was a thick file of evidence, along with a large screen displaying threatening letters, unreasonable fines, and a series of coercive emails. As each document was presented, I saw Karen stiffen, her lips pressed together, her eyes filled with worry. But the hardest blow was yet to come. The chairman said sternly, and finally, the most serious evidence: trespassing and vandalism of resident property. The screen changed, and the video from my security camera appeared clearly, recording Karen secretly plucking sunflowers in the middle of the night. The room fell silent before whispers broke out. Some residents shook their heads in shock. Others sighed as if they finally saw her true nature. Karen stood up, her voice trembling but still trying to maintain her authority. This video proves nothing. I was just inspecting the grounds to ensure HOA standards. I have the right to do so. The chairman frowned, flipping a page of the file. According to the HOA bylaws, no member has the right to trespass on private property without consent or a legal order. Not only did you trespass, but you also vandalized resident property, which is not only a violation of HOA rules but could also constitute a crime. Karen froze, her hands shaking, no longer able to defend herself. The battle she believed she would win had completely collapsed. She opened her mouth to protest, but an elderly resident spoke first, his voice filled with indignation. She didn't just destroy the flower garden. I was fined for just planting a small pot of plants on my porch. If anyone doesn't follow her unreasonable rules, they are fined or threatened. We've had enough. Voices of agreement rang out throughout the room. A man stood up, holding up a thick stack of tickets, his voice filled with anger. These are the fines I was forced to pay just for parking in my own yard. How many people here have been threatened, harassed, or fined by Karen? Hands shot up. The room exploded, residents recounting their experiences of being bullied by the HOA. Karen shook her head repeatedly, her hands gripping the edge of the table, her eyes filled with panic as she realized she was no longer in control of the situation. The chairman slammed the gavel down on the table, signaling everyone to be quiet. He looked straight at Karen, his voice cold, MS. Karen, it is clear that your power has been abused. Not only did you violate the rights of residents, you also manipulated the HOA to impose unreasonable regulations. The council has reviewed all the evidence and come to the final decision. He paused. The room fell silent. Karen held her breath, her eyes wide open in anticipation. You are removed from the position of HOA president, effective immediately. Applause broke out. A few people even cheered in excitement. Karen sat there, her face completely pale, her lips moving as if she wanted to say something, but no one cared. Her reign had officially ended. Applause erupted from the room. I looked at Karen, who was stunned, her eyes blinking rapidly, her mouth moving, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. It was the moment she realized she had completely lost. No more power, no more control, no more the person the whole neighborhood feared. But Karen's nightmare wasn't over. A council member stood up, holding a file, his voice calm but authoritative, based on the resident complaint. We are not only asking you to resign, but we are asking you to leave this neighborhood permanently. Karen jumped up, her face red with anger, trying to regain her usual authoritative demeanor, but her voice shook with anger. You can't do this to me. I've worked hard for this neighborhood for so many years. I'm going to sue. I won't let this go." But no one cared anymore. The evidence was too clear. Every unreasonable citation, every threatening email, every invasion of privacy, all laid bare for the entire neighborhood. There was nothing left to deny. Those who had feared and bowed to her now watched silently, without a single glance of sympathy. The vote was taken on the spot. Unsurprisingly, Karen was removed by a near-unanimous vote. The board, reluctant as it was, had no choice. When the meeting ended, Karen hastily packed up her things, looking down to avoid eye contact. She was completely alone. Karen was no longer HOA president. But that wasn't the end of the story. Karen wasn't just out of office. The community didn't want her. A woman who had spent years oppressing her neighbors couldn't expect to be forgiven. Residents continued to file complaints about her behavior, and the HOA had no choice but to pressure Karen to leave. A few days after the meeting, a for sale sign appeared in front of her house. Karen's house, a symbol of authoritarian control, was now a reminder that no one can abuse power forever. Karen was no longer on the streets. No more fine letters, no more prying eyes, no more threatening emails. Silence fell over the neighborhood, but this time it was not fear but liberation. A few weeks later, early one morning, I saw a moving truck pull up in front of Karen's house. Workers were busy loading boxes onto the truck, and Karen, her face cold and gloomy, stood there to witness it all. She left the neighborhood in silence. No one said goodbye. I stood at a distance, sipping my morning coffee, watching Karen's car leave, no one looking back. In the end, Karen's HOA was crushed by the very power she once controlled. And this time, no one in the neighborhood had to live under her tyrannical shadow anymore. An era of fear was over. The stiff HOA notices were gone, replaced by open conversations between neighbors, smiles that had been rare before. No more worrying about unreasonable fines, no more tense meetings over the color of the garage door or the height of the lawn. A new atmosphere began to spread, a real community, not a neighborhood controlled by fear. I knew I had won, but what mattered more was not getting rid of Karen, but the real sense of freedom the whole neighborhood now enjoyed. The next morning, I walked out of the house, lighter than ever. No more prying eyes from the house across the street, no more threatening emails, no meaningless warnings from the HOA. Just me, the open road, and the fresh morning air. I walked more slowly than usual, enjoying every step on the sidewalk I had been accused of abusing. No one stopped me. No one made any more unreasonable rules. There was something different in the air, lighter, more pleasant. I began to notice that many of the houses in the neighborhood had changed. The non-standard colored curtains that the HOA had once banned had appeared. Some lawns were no longer manicured to the point of lifelessness, replaced by colorful little gardens. Things that had previously been considered too prominent, inappropriate, aesthetically disturbing were now welcomed as part of the new freedom. In the days that followed, the neighborhood was more lively than ever. People no longer whispered about the HOA with fear. Conversations were more relaxed, and it seemed like people were regaining the confidence they had lost under Karen's rule. I saw kids riding their bikes on the street without fear of being complained about unnecessary noise. Neighbors who had barely left their homes before now stood chatting happily on the sidewalk. No one was afraid of a judgmental look from behind Karen's curtains. And the best part? I was no longer walking alone. The next morning, when I stepped outside, I noticed a small group had gathered in front of my house, ready for a walk around the neighborhood. Familiar faces smiled, a few waved at me. No one was sneaking around. No one was afraid that the HOA would send them a warning letter for daring to enjoy the public space. It turned out that I wasn't the only one who felt constrained by unreasonable rules. And with Karen gone, we were all ready to enjoy our freedom. With each step, it became clearer to me that this fight was never just about me or about walking past someone's house. It was about the right to exist without unreasonable control, about standing up when someone abuses their power to impose unfair rules. And most importantly, it was about creating an environment where people can truly live without fear. By the time I finished my walk, the sun was a little higher in the sky, reflecting off the clean windows, the colorful flower beds on the front porches. It felt different. Lakewood had changed. No longer a neighborhood ruled by an overbearing HOA, but a community where people could truly call home. I took a deep breath, took in the view, and knew that finally we had our lives back. And this time, no one could take it away.